Jan has been growing orchids off and on since 1976. Currently, she has about 200 plants under lights in her basement. The orchids, some are outside in a lab house. About 20 years ago, she started helping other Greater Cincinnati Orchid Society members setting up exhibits. Her interest in going to regional orchid shows gradually expanded, and eventually she decided to become an American Orchid Society judge. She is an accredited AOS judge and the past chair of the Cincinnati Judging Center. She is very active in her local society, setting exhibits, doing an occasional program, and going on hikes in the region, looking at native orchids in the wild, or as wild as it gets in the Midwest. Now that she is retired, she's trying to expand this last activity, hiking with friends and with people that she meets with the Orchid Society and with other fellow orchid lovers. The title of our program tonight is If You Can Dress Yourself, You Can Do an Orchid Exhibit. James? Thank you. How's the focus, everybody?
Looks good.
Good, okay. Here's an overview of what I'm going to talk about, and I'll get in front of the microphone too so people can hear me. I'm going to talk about initially what I do first thing and kind of the nuts and bolts of what I do when I get to a location. I'm going to talk about design principles, and because that's important to know, because I'm going to translate that or try to translate that into practical tips, things I learned. Larry Sanford, and I think a number of you may know Larry, taught me how to do exhibits, and being the engineer that he is or was, he had rules. So you're going to hear his rules. But they're fairly universal. And then I'm going to show you lots and lots of exhibits, only 2 or 3 from Cincinnati, because I've gone to all kinds of shows here and in 2 or 3 countries. And I think there's something to be learned from exhibits that other people do in other regions, because you'll see a lot of style differences. And I'm going to go from tabletops to some mega exhibits that would be very hard for us to create in a society, but you can still learn some things or find some things that you think they did well or think they didn't do well. I'm going to close with a rogues gallery of things that I want everyone to see you do, because since you've heard me say this will be a bad idea, I want you to really write that down. And then I'll encourage you to get your hands dirty, and particularly with the fall show coming up. And I know in the last few years especially, we've had a wonderful turnout of plants. I think that is a wonderful opportunity to do, here's a suggestion, do 2 exhibits. Maybe an island, or do a big exhibit, and then pair off some plants so that people go to town and practice, whether it's an individual exhibit or a smaller beginners group. There's nothing like practice to get better and better and better at this. I've been doing this for a long time now. Some of the things I'm talking about are things I learned along the way. So having said that, I really believe, and I'm only partially being flipped, that if you can dress yourself, you can do an orchid exhibit. And my goal is to point out some things that make it a better orchid exhibit. So, how do you get from this is my old Tahoe, and I have a new Tahoe with less cargo space. This is the old Tahoe. In the spring, how do you get from this to this? This is an old exhibit from the Cincinnati Orchid Society, and sad to say that a magnificent piece of driftwood in the center retired when Pat June retired, so it's no longer at my disposal. But that has a lot of strong points, and hopefully by the end of my talk, you'll be able to look at an exhibit, yours or mine or somebody else's, and see some of the things you think are strong points too. Nobody does a perfect exhibit. I've never done one. I probably never will, because I always do some Monday morning quarterbacking at the end of the show, or on Saturday afternoon, walking back to something I've done and saying, you know, I might have shifted this plan, I might have swapped a couple things. But anything you do, having done this, I understand you're doing under the press of time. You're doing under with plants that aren't necessarily cooperating, and that best flowers are not necessarily facing all the right directions. Some of them may be upside down. And some of the plants that someone told you they were sending and you got very excited about didn't show. So with that in mind, here's what you can do with what you've got. This is what I do when I unpack the car and everything's in the show location. Generally, I try to sort plants by color because most of the time, even though I've registered a lot of plants, I may not necessarily know what they look like or how big they are. I'm always surprised. So I sort plants by color because that tells me how much space I should allot toward a particular color group. And I select a focal point plant, and if you're lucky, you'll have 2 or 3 good plants to choose from. Reds are an obvious focal point, but don't overthink it. Just let your eyes wander through your plants and remember the plants that catch your attention. Those are your strongest plants, and those are the plants that I would encourage you to work with first. So keep those in mind, and then start building a skeleton. I use a lot of driftwood. I use a lot of tables or stands, cages that I elevate. And I always go for kind of an irregularly shaped exhibit. And I'll explain why. And there's really 2 kinds of exhibits. There are exhibits that are symmetrical, in terms of when you look at them, the right half sort of visually matches the left half. I think it's very hard for a society to replicate, but we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. I plug in my lights because I've learned, after about 2 years, I finally learned that you don't want to crawl through a finished exhibit to find the outlet for your light cords. And this is the thing that everyone overlooks. And after 2 years, I finally figured it out. So plug your lights in now. Set your focal point plants in and see if they work with your basic skeleton. Because you want your strongest plants to work well together. You don't want them all packed in the same spot. You want them spread out over the exhibit if the colors lend themselves that way. And that gives you a guideline to how you arrange the rest of your plants. Wrap them while you can. And when I work with other volunteers, or particularly with someone who either thinks differently than I do or doesn't have a lot of experience, when they see the big guys go in, they get all excited. They start grabbing all the plants of that color and popping them in. And having learned the hard way, I would say don't do it at that point, because I've done some exhibits where I'm about halfway through and I have this epiphany that some important plants are not in the right spot. But because everything's been filled in around them, I've now let too much time go by to undo it, so I'm stuck. And it's not that much fun to finish an exhibit that you know you could have done better, and it's now too late. So establish a priority. Get your biggest and best plants in first. Make sure you're happy with that. Wrap them in pots while you can, because almost certainly some of them are going to be in the back. And again, like plugging in the lights, this is your opportunity to get them all tidied up, and you can forget about them. Okay, then you do the rest of the exhibit. This is what I'm going to tell you how to get to that part. There's principles of design, and if you look at an AOS score sheet, there's 100 points. 35 of it goes to plant quality, another 20 for plant variety, but 35 points go for design. And there's 6 key points. One of the big ones, at least in terms of getting started, is balance. And it's visual stability. It's not like, someone's going to weigh one side of the exhibit or another. But think of your exhibit as 2 halves. And I would encourage you, when you're doing the exhibit, at some point when you're, halfway done or on the home stretch, stand back or take a walk, refresh your eyes, and then come back and look at your exhibit and see if one side is extremely loaded and heavy with plants and the other one not. If it's balanced or somewhat balanced, that's much more desirable, because a lopsided exhibit, one that feels visually really heavy on one side, is a little disturbing. You may not be able to pinpoint it, but that's not a helpful thing. You can get balance 2 ways. Symmetrical, where the 2 sides are as alike as possible. And I've got some examples that I think this will make a lot of sense. Asymmetrical balance. When I talk about focal points, I'm really talking about asymmetrical balance. because the two sides visually look equivalent, but you're using different plants and different things to get there, different props. One side does not match the other side, or you'll use darker colors or closed spaces, bolder things. And particularly when you're in a society and you've got a lot of people bringing in plants, you're not going to get 15 camellias that are white, or 10 purple phalaenopsis that you can use to create a symmetrical exhibit. You're going to get one or two of any one particular kind of thing. So nothing is likely to balance. So asymmetry is your friend. And asymmetry is also much more dramatic right out of the gate. And that's much more helpful, I think. Contrast is difference. And that, when I'm working with an exhibit of plants, generally I'm thinking color at that point. When you put contrasting colors, or you go from like orchids that are purple, leading in orchids that are orange or yellow. Contrasting colors, reds and greens, reds and whites, things like that. Dominance is you've got one striking element. It could be curved lines, it could be very strong shades, and that frequently can be satisfied by your focal point plant and or any props that it's next to, like driftwood or an object. Proportion, nothing is too big or too little. That'll make sense when you see some slides down the road. Rhythm is kind of key, and that's when you blend your colors. You can use minor colors in one plant to transition to stronger colors in another. And you can create a flow of color through your exhibit, because what Larry emphasized to me was you want your eyes to move through the whole exhibit, so that by the time you finish, you've seen the whole exhibit. You don't just find one cluster of white plants or big red plant or big yellow plants and then walk on thinking you've seen the whole exhibit. You want to have some action when you're looking at the exhibit. And at the same time, you want some dark spaces to rest your eyes. And when you're doing the exhibit and you stand back like an observer would, that will make a lot of sense to you. Scale is a real minor point. It's very closely related to proportion. And it'll notice when things are out of scale only if the contrast in size between items is too large. You've got one monster plant and 6 little guys. That's visually kind of disturbing. So those are the principles. And let's talk about how to make them work for you. I've got some samples here, and this is an exhibit. This is one I did for Columbus a number of years ago. I don't have a particularly good, strong focal point plant, but what I did and what you can do if you need to is cluster some strong colors together. Red's an obvious one. Yellow is also a good one. Purple camellias or purple plants work together. You can cluster similar colors together to create kind of a focal area. You can see I've tried to use whites in a line. I've got a laser pointer here. So I've got whites up here. I'm moving down here through a flow. I'm picking up some colors, purples, and it'll somewhat reinforce a little bit by this, but there's my attempt at moving some color here. We've got yellows and oranges off this side. I do like this side. And you've got differences in elevation, but you've got yellows and oranges and browns moving off in this area, and you've got a little dab of purple down here. So that's not a half bad exhibit. This is a much better example of dominance. I've got 2 huge plants here, white phalaenopsis and a white miltoniopsis here. So this is my focal point area. And I've got some whites here, so here's kind of a color line. Got purples clustered here, and the color line runs down this way. And I've got yellows in a similar line down here. And this is something that you can replicate, because you'll see this in some other exhibits that other people did. Paths in particular lend themselves to being clustered in a field, and you can use related colors, and they all look like, they all work well together. And at the same time, each of the plants can be seen individually. And then one of my goals, and that's been my goal as a society member, I will use any plant that someone sends to the society. Some plants are much more helpful to me, but every plant deserves a shot at a ribbon. So every plant will be in the exhibit in the spot I think I can give it a good chance without, if it helps the exhibit, fine. If it's not a particularly strong plant, I'll put it in a lesser location. At the same time, I want it to be found, I want it to be fairly judged. Now here, this is, I went to the Taiwan International Show in Hainan City in January of 2017. And if you ever have a chance to see a great big show, take the opportunity to do it. The Taiwanese, these were exhibits put in by commercial companies or by large societies or by large orchid-related organizations. And they're very much into symmetry. These exhibits were outside. Their climate is a tropical climate, and so even in January, the temperatures were in the 70s. And even though if you divide it in half, the colors aren't the same on either side, nonetheless, there's enough mass to suggest that the right side is very similar visually to the left side. The fields were also really tremendous quality. Here's another exhibit from the same show. This is intended to be suggestive of clouds. It's really cotton, but it's intended to be suggestive of clouds. And if you divide the exhibit visually, you've got the center picture, you've got the coffee table with 3 chairs, and then a single tray of succulents. And this is one mass on one side, and I would call that a symmetrical exhibit because if you divide it in half, the right side visually is very similar to the left side. And the last one, this exhibit is really right here. You've got the center trellises, or the trellises on the right side, the left side, the center little bridge. You've got the little, God knows what those are, I think they're frogs. So that's a symmetrical exhibit. And again, if you're a society, chances are you're not going to get plants coming in that fall into categories that you can neatly say, okay, these guys will go on the left, these guys will go on the right, everything will be matchy-matchy. So practical tips, things that Larry taught me or things that I've learned. You can use driftwood or elevated tables and cages to create a visually interesting skeleton, and that's a good starting point. If your skeleton looks pretty good, meaning that if you start popping plants in, there's very little that's going to be in a straight line, like a chorus line or a school group picture. So that's a good starting point. You can use, driftwood is so versatile. Pieces of any size. You can use the great big pieces to create a strong vertical line for strong vertical plants. You can use them as background to make color pop. You can use them to separate colors that otherwise wouldn't go well together. So as I said earlier, place your best plants first because that will drive your overall color scheme. And then place your next best plants. And then place the stragglers. And again, if a plant can't help the exhibit, place it where it will do the least amount of harm. And I'm talking about the one white plant. I'm talking about the one red plant that doesn't seem to go anywhere. And it doesn't really match with anything that you've put together. Sometimes it does, but you can always find a spot, maybe along the side, maybe hanging from the backdrop is kind of a little exclamation point. You can always find a spot for any plant where it can be found and ribbon judged. Generally, white or light flowers are visually lighter, so they tend to work well for you when you place them up higher in the exhibit. Similarly, darker plants are visually heavier, so you place them lower, and you can work from plants even in like shades of purple, from pink to pink purple to lavender, lighter to darker, and that not only that creates a line of color, and that you can use that to create rhythm in your exhibit. And you can use the secondary colors, like, cattleyas frequently have other colors than the phalaenopsis, oncidiums. Lots and lots of orchids have a dominant color and then other colors that are accessories, somewhere in the sepals and petals. You can use that to transition to other colors in the exhibit. And that gives you tremendous versatility. You can go from whites to yellows or pinks and pinks to purples, reds next to green, and so forth. And if all else fails, remember this, hot colors work together. If you have one of several vibrant colors, reds, yellows, oranges, put them together and they will work. Similarly, don't split similar colors. I once did an exhibit in Indianapolis. I had two oncidiums from Larry, both kind of red. One might have been red, one might have been blue-red. And I put them, I didn't think they looked well together, so I put them on opposite sides of the exhibit down in front. And after everything was over on Saturday afternoon, I asked Dick Wells to come over. He and Woji Klakunas, I think some of you may remember Woji, they were working on exhibits at the same time. I'm sure they won the show trophy because Dick had the plants, Woji had the design skills, and they did magnificent exhibits. I asked Dick Wells, I said, give me a critique on my exhibit. And there were some things he liked, but he pointed to those two odontoglossums. And he said, don't split your colors like that. They're so alike. They look like two little totems, and your eye just bops back and forth between them. So try not to split similar colors. Use all the corners of your exhibit. That means height, that means front to back. You can always mount small plants on driftwood. I love big pieces of driftwood, and I love stumps, because you can pop plants all along the column of a tree or a branch, and in a trunk you can pop smaller plants in all the little pockets. And one, they bring some balance to the exhibit because they're close to driftwood, but also every plant is set off well by the wood. Don't fall in love with your props, or don't fall in love with your driftwood too. Particularly when I was new, I'd get my 4 or 5 best plants in with driftwood or with a nice prop, and it would look awesome. I just think, oh, I am so done. And I look behind me and there's another 20 plants that need to be popped in. And so don't confuse your exhibit with an art display, because you've got to get all the plants in. And your props all have jobs. Your driftwood has a job. It is not the focal point of your exhibit. The focal point of your exhibit and the purpose of your exhibit is to set off the orchids, not to show everyone what a magnificent piece of driftwood you've got. We've got a painted Buddha and we've got some other stuff. They're useful, but even when I put them in the exhibit, I remind myself their job is to set off something. It is to set off a nice plant or a nice set of plants. So I'm going to cover them up or put plants in a way that the prop is less of a highlight of the exhibit, and its job is to show off the plant that's in its lap or is next to it or is mounted over its head. So don't fall in love with your props. Don't fall in love with your driftwood. And I learned this. I've done all these things, sometimes badly. If you're new to exhibits, you'll generally do 2 things. You'll initially push all your orchids toward the back of the exhibit, and they're going to be too close together. And I didn't do the Columbus show last year. Instead, some friends of mine did, and a couple people were helping that are new to exhibits. And that was 2 years ago. I was working on the exhibit. I must have gotten some food and they were putting plants in, and when I came back, half the plants are in about a third of the exhibit, and they're all in the back. And I stood back and looked at it, because I used to do this, and I said, start pulling these guys forward. You've got the space, and you want to have some space to separate your plants. You still want similar colors together and all that, but if they're all mushed together in the back, it's going to look a little claustrophobic, and anyone looking at your exhibit is going to feel that. So pull them forward, give them some space. And also, and I spent years on this last point, I'd have the exhibit 90% done, or maybe 30% done, and I'd get stuck on something. I would look at the plants I had in the exhibit, the plants I had left, and think, okay, now what am I going to do? And I would, because what I had done, I probably liked a lot, but it may not necessarily have worked with what I still had in the boxes. So, I don't know who suggested this, might have been Steve Helbling. Steve has done lots of wonderful exhibits in his time. Someone said, just start moving things. Grab a plant that's in the box that you cannot find a place for, you think, and put it where you would think it ought to go, even if there's another plant already there. Take that plant out, put the other plant in. And if you keep doing that, you will gradually get unstuck. And the lesson I drew from this is sometimes your initial assumption about where your best plants should go is wrong or just won't work. So don't try to force something. Instead, just make a change. Make any change. Pick a plant and move it and see if that changes your thought process and gets you unstuck. And that's probably the hardest lesson I ever learned from doing orchids, and it took me several years to do that. So I'm trying to pass that on because I think it does happen, and that's the best solution I have found for it. So here's some show and tell, and we're going to start up the tabletops and get bigger and bigger. This is, actually I would call this a somewhat symmetrical exhibit. This was, if you divide this in half, you've got clusters of paths here, bring this in the center, clusters of paths here. Everything's in good scale. This was done by Glenn Decker of Piping Rock Orchids at an AOS trustees meeting at the Huntington Library. I did win the AOS show trophy. I'm not sure if it got any kind of trophy at all. There were probably 60-some exhibits in the show. It was huge. But I thought it was very well done, and I think there's some lessons to learn in massing plants and doing things to scale. By the way, I'm going to send a copy of this to anybody. This is in PowerPoint. Put it on a flash drive or put it in Dropbox, and so anyone who is interested can have access to this. These are two exhibits. This is actually Andy's Orchids exhibit, also from the Huntington show. I wish I had a better picture of it. This is the exhibit that did get the show trophy. There were exhibits in the show that were probably 100 square feet. And yet, this Wardian case got the show trophy. And unfortunately, because I only have the one picture, you can't see all the great things, but it was like looking in a little jeweler's window. All the plants were lovely. They were surrounded in a very natural environment. You can see some good color flow, browns and yellows along this side. Lots of nice driftwood. But the moral to take from this is that a small exhibit done well can do very well trophy-wise and ribbon-wise at a show. So bigger does not translate into always getting the big kahuna, getting the big prize. This was another exhibit that Andy's Orchids did. This is in Portland, Oregon, also at a AOS trustees meeting. And he's taken or made up 2 pieces of driftwood like totems and matted plants from top to bottom. Unfortunately, because they're islands, the backdrop doesn't show the plants up to their best effect. But it was very well done. The plants are on proportion to each other. There's good color scheme. And it's a charming display. This is at a Minnesota Mid-America Orchid Conference. And I think this was also a commercial exhibit. This is a tabletop. I would call this a somewhat symmetrical exhibit. And the only thing that probably you can see already, when I said lighter colors work best at the top, that's a rule they ignored. And what I told you is their guidelines, and that particular rule is broken all the time. So don't let the guidelines, don't think that they can never be broken if they're not flexible. You've still got judgment, and I still think this exhibit works fairly well. It's a very charming exhibit because all the orchids are set up nicely. Hot colors work together. here. And you can use ferns and moss and driftwood to balance the exhibit, to fill it in, to make it look, to serve as transitions, and set off the plants really well. This is the exhibit, this is back to the Portland, Oregon trustees meeting. This is the exhibit that did win the show trophy. This is on a rectangular table, but it's actually an island. You're seeing the front half of the exhibit, but there were plants on the base side. I would call this a symmetrical exhibit. Hot colors working together. This is a row of Dendrobium cuthbertsonii. This Golden Gate orchids owned by Tom Perligi. It was so well done. Everything was at eye level. You walked around the exhibit. The plant quality was superb. But the design elements, you can see the strong vertical lines here. And again, I don't know that there's much of any driftwood in there, but there's the ferns here kind of fill in the base, and the moss sets off all the plants. And it was a lovely exhibit. And again, it beat exhibits that were 50 and 100 square feet. This is an exhibit by Edgar Stelly. I think everyone knows Edgar. Edgar does wonderful exhibits, and I think he has two good strengths. He understands drama, and he's got, an enormous, very dramatic in its own right piece of driftwood. But he uses it well, and you can see he's mounted plants here and here, and he's used the pockets in the driftwood to display other plants that are also very, very nice. And then he uses other objects to, for balance and to provide some weight at the bottom of the exhibit. I don't know, I think he's only got maybe one or two pieces of driftwood, and a lot of his exhibits are kind of along this style. But he's using a lot of height, he's showing off the plants well, and he generally, one has superb plants, but he does understand color. Oops, Amy. Too far. Here we go. This is, I think, a very cool prop. There's a couple from Columbus, Ohio, Tom and Pat Stinson, who do generally 25 square foot exhibits, their own plants, and they have a whimsical quality to their exhibits that I personally can't duplicate. And also Tom, I think, is a really good craftsman. And even though I say don't fall in love with your props, this is a dog, and you can't see it unfortunately very well, but he's got a fishing pole up here with a line that has a fish on it here. And even though it's a dominant prop, it was charming as all get out. The arc of the fishing line up here, he's got the phales mounted up high, and the fishing line follows the arc of the phalaenopsis. He's got lots of the phales up high, around, and on either side of the dog, leading to darker colors down low. And then he's got some stones and a good use of ivy down here. And that reinforces in part also the gray color of the dog. If you have a chance to ever go to the Columbus exhibit, he and Tom and his wife Pat do exhibits every year. There's always something to be learned by how they do their exhibits. They're very, very good at this. This was at the Buffalo, New York, Mid-America. I wish I could tell you who put this exhibit in. It was a commercial vendor that was in part selling fake orchids made out of, a plaster or a plastic kind of substance, mixed in with some live orchids. And it had a fairyland quality that I thought was very charming. And their props here were antique little terrariums. But notice how the scale of both plants, fake and live, and the props are in proportion to one another. And they're using things like the rocks and the moss to create visual lines through the exhibit. I'm sure there's qualities about this exhibit or guidelines that have broken a lot of rules, but the overall effect of this one I thought was extremely nice. Now, we're getting into more larger tabletops, the typical 25 square foot exhibit. And when I talk about creating a skeleton, a strong skeleton for your plants, this is, I think, where this exhibit started. They've got some nice pieces of driftwood here with lots of pockets. They're creating this line here, and then this line on the diagonal, which leads up to some very strong colors. When I'm doing an exhibit, I generally try to keep my focal point plants within, if I think of the exhibit as a square or a rectangle like this, I generally try to keep my focal point plants kind of in this area here. I don't want them too much on the perimeter. This is, I think, pushing it, and so I would call this their focal point plant. At the same time, though, notice how this line is reinforced by this line. So if I were doing this exhibit, I probably would have done it differently because they've got a lot of lighter colors like the whites on the bottom. I've just told you that's probably not a great thing to do. I also said that's the rule that's also violated pretty often. So again, sometimes your plants don't cooperate because of the kind of plants they are. Some things naturally look better mounted up high, some white plants are purely terrestrial, and your gut tells you they ought to be mounted low. So the guidelines are flexible. Nonetheless, I see how the driftwood sets off these particular plants, and it's serving multiple uses. It's providing little cubby holes for plants to be seen. It's providing backdrops where the plants pop. And it's reinforcing the lines, the angular lines through the exhibit that lead up this way. So I would call that exhibit a success. Jordan Hawley, I don't know how many of you know, Jordan is from Lexington. He's now just the past chair of the Cincinnati Judging Center. He does wonderful exhibits. I wish he would exhibit more, but he's got 4 young kids and 2 businesses, so orchids are, and he's also remodeling his house this summer. So he told us at the end of his term that we wouldn't see a lot of him this next year. But he grows superbly well, even though he's exhibiting under the Central Kentucky Orchid Society. These were all of his plants. But notice how he's got one magnificent piece of driftwood here, and notice how it reinforces the vertical lines of the dendrobiums here and the plants in back of it. And to me, this is the strongest part of his exhibit. He's still got the lighter colors up at the top, and then he's got hot colors working together down here. And then if you think of the exhibit as, again, asymmetrical, and you go from here to here, and then he's got green foliage plants down here so that the exhibit looks finished top to bottom. This is another one of his exhibits. Again, different shows, different years, same dendrobiums, I think. He's taking full advantage of them being mounted high. And what he did, because sometimes plants need to be mounted higher than anything that you've got handy, he simply brought poles, painted them black, and you can see the pots here are wrapped in black. And so the pot virtually disappears. And that's one of the things that when you're putting your exhibit together, think about how black can cover up things that you don't otherwise want attention brought to. So black cloth or dark colors can hide things. And again, you can see visually everything is weighted toward the bottom. Lighter colors on top, you've got your whites working down here. The big dendrobium is now his anchor. This is a Cincinnati exhibit, I think, of one of the Kentucky shows a number of years ago when we were still when Jim Lurton was still active, and he joined our society because Central Kentucky by that time was largely not exhibiting anywhere, and he had great plants he wanted to exhibit, and we were thrilled. So at the start when I said, find your focal point plant or plants, frequently with a strong showing, you will have choices. So I would, in contention, would have been this plant, and this plant. And we decided, I made the decision, because I think I was in charge of this exhibit, this was both the biggest and boldest plant, but I'm using it, the driftwood here, to show these two plants at a good advantage to provide some anchor to this plant. And that kind of leaves this plant out hanging until I decide to put it on the backdrop itself, like a punctuation point. And one of the things which I think these ferns helped at this point was they kind of serve as a transition between the reds here and the other colors at the bottom of the exhibit. But that, I think, was probably the best part of this exhibit. I'm not impressed by what I did there, but that's some Monday morning quarterbacking. You can tell I love driftwood. And if you've been to shows, Dayton and Columbus and Indianapolis and other places, you'll probably come away thinking that most of the societies do sort of naturalistic exhibits. As you go into other regions, you'll see some different styles and some things that we probably wouldn't consider doing. This is in, I think, Kansas City or Nashville at an MAOC. I don't know who did the exhibit, but this is, in all respects, kind of a made-up tree. It's cork, probably on pipe in large part. And this is an island exhibit, only 25 square feet. But notice how they've mannered the plants. And again, vandaceous plants look good up high, regardless of the color. That's just kind of where they belong. I won't put a vanda, if I can help it, below the top half of the exhibit because it just starts to look wrong when you put a vanda down low. So colors notwithstanding, they're going to go up high. And an island gives you a lot of flexibility because you can use the sides of the island to separate colors and gives you choices. And the driftwood, the whole plant, the whole tree is covered with plants. And it looks very, very naturalistic. And as you go from one side to the other, you can see how this angular part of the exhibit reinforces this line of small callias. And this is clearly a yellow dominant side. Again, this is probably Kansas City or Memphis, MAOC. There's the Springfield Orchid Society, and I think it's Springfield, Illinois, does wonderful exhibits. Whenever I'm at a show somewhere in the Plains States area, I look to see if they're exhibiting because they consistently do a wonderful job. Their members grow a lot of vandas, and this is what they've done with them. Again, hot colors work together, but they've still created a color line of pinks and purples down here. They've tried to keep their oranges and yellows down here. And one of the things that they regularly do is they provide some interesting props. And here in the middle, and there's a close-up over here, this would be like an orchid hunting exhibition. And this won the show trophy. So I think there's a show trophy down there, and it very well, there's a Mid-America Society plaque for the best exhibit by an affiliated society, and I think it won that one too. Their society, I don't know who or how many people are putting this together, but they do a very fine job consistently. This is how some other societies have handled vandaceous plants. Susan and Charles Wilson did this exhibit at a Memphis MAOC, and these were largely their plants. They took a trellis and just hung the plants on the trellis and created an island so that the plants could be seen on all four sides. And again, the trellis is very effective because it frames the plants. Hot colors work together. And then they've got some non-vandaceous plants down low. And in another show, I can't remember where this one was, it might have been Wichita, the exhibitors created a fake log and then mounted the plants top to bottom. So those are just some suggestions on what to do with vandaceous plants, because otherwise, because of the hangers and the roots, they can be a handful to deal with. And frequently, if I can't mount them on or next to something, I end up hanging them from the backdrop just like everybody else does. This is Mid-America in Minneapolis from a number of years ago. This is actually a commercial exhibit by Orchids Limited. And I thought it was kind of a combination of several things. The society itself did an exhibit that was approximately 100 square feet. It was a long island. I mean, you walked the length of it. And this was at one end of the show. This could be an exhibit all by itself. And being a commercial exhibitor, Jerry Fisher had lots of plants to choose from, but he's got, again, hot colors. He's got reds at the bottom here in greater concentration, so there's a little bit more visual weight there. He's got yellow and green frags up here, and his individual plants got lots of awards. I don't know if the exhibit got an award, but I thought it was unique, it was interestingly done. And here's a close-up of the tree. Again, I think it's a made-up tree, but he's got a lot of equiton oncidiums, another pendant oncidiums up here, the lighter colors up top, and then darker colors at the bottom. And they're reinforcing some of the secondary colors in the equitons, and I thought that was particularly lovely. This is the first time Cincinnati and Dayton hosted a Mid-America. The Dayton Society did a tree. This was the focal point plant, a big dendrochilum. And I thought the tree and the dendrochilum itself were the best parts of the exhibit, but it was incredibly dramatic. And the advantage of an island is that if you have lots of plants, there's almost no better way to display them. So what if you don't have a big piece of driftwood? And here's some driftwood. When I go places, I look for interesting pieces of wood. Unfortunately, I cannot get my hands on these. These are massive pieces of driftwood from Yixin, a nursery in Taiwan. And it requires a bobcat to get these guys on the truck. But doesn't that just break your heart? I mean, look at all the places you could pop plants in there. I mean, that is an exhibit by itself. You put that on an island, fill it with plants, and you don't need anything else. It would just be a distraction. But this was even bigger, but these are both bobcat-worthy plants. This was on a beach on the Galapagos, and I didn't include two other stumps that had washed up. I fell in love with them. I've also fallen in love with a plant, with a piece of driftwood that was bobbing in the water when I was diving in Belize. There's a stump off the boardwalk at Cedar Bog, which I would love to get my hands on, except I think if I try to hoist it on my back, I'll get arrested. But keep your eyes peeled for interesting pieces of wood, because large or small, you can use them. Or you can make your own. What Dayton has done in the last few years, what the Miami Valley Orchid Society has done in the last few years, is make a tree out of piping, paint it black or put tape on it where the joints are, and then hot glue or wire pieces of cork on it. And if you do that, you can create any size, any shape that you want, and then you can break it apart for transport. And it sits in a box, this box here, and I think there might be some sandbags in there so that it doesn't fall down. But if you're not fortunate enough to have somebody with woods or someone who's got some lake property or is willing to troll the riverbanks after the spring floods, go to Home Depot, go to a garden store, and make your own. Because again, you can rip these guys apart and make another shape in a couple years if you are bored with it. We're moving into larger exhibits now, and this is one exhibit in one of the Plain States, and I had almost second thoughts about including it, but it makes a couple points that I think are worthwhile. One, there's good use of color here. At the same time, look at all the wasted space along this tree. These little pockets here have been a good place to pop a focal point plant. Wouldn't it have been nice to put some plants up on the tree itself? Because there's a few plants there, but most of the tree looks a little stark. And I almost think that's an example of falling in love with your driftwood or falling in love with your crop, where you think it becomes a feature point all by itself. Another thing too, which was, I don't think would likely be repeated, is they have lights, but they needed some place to put them, so they popped a piece of driftwood right in the middle and then mounted the lights on it. I don't recommend that. And with LEDs being very small now, you don't even have to do that because you can get small LEDs from Home Depot and Lowe's, and I've done that. You can put in the center of the exhibit itself, run the wires, and again, you're only highlighting a plant here or there, but it's very unobtrusive. And the goal is to highlight the plant, not the thing. So that, I think, is a mixed blessing. It did get the show trophy, that's what that little bauble is there, because they did a lot of things right, but I think mostly it won because they did, it was big, and they did more things right than they did wrong. We're getting into different regions now. This is Shreveport, Louisiana, and they're trying to mimic the French Quarter, and this did get the AOS show trophy, and I'm not really quite sure why, because I struggle with exhibits that are not exactly plant-centric, or where I think the props just look wonky. But, you know, they've got individual little islands here which they tried to separate colors. And it was big, it was dramatic, and it got the show trophy. I will make some comments here where exhibits did better than I think they deserve to be, where sometimes size kind of overwhelms everything else. Nonetheless, I think it's important, particularly if you've not gone to places where people grow wildly different plants than we do. If you go down into Texas and the South where it's tremendously hot, you'll find dendrobiums that are my height and my size, and they're in everybody's exhibit. And that they can sometimes be hard to work with because their size is so massive, you're automatically locked into a big exhibit, and maybe you don't have comparable plants. Maybe you just have a flood of big dendrobiums, and what do you do with them to show them off well? This is the Houston AOS trustees meeting where I don't quite know what to make of this. I think this is an oil derrick. I will give it 10 points for being incredibly dramatic because you walked into the hotel lobby and it was absolutely amazing. But even though I think you can have working plants too low, you can also have working plants too high. I mean, this was clearly done for artistic effect. But some of those white fields were actually entered for ribbons. And you can't possibly judge those things. So, you know, it was incredibly dramatic. It drew all this into the show. And the rest of the island here is fairly routine. Oops. This was also the Houston AOS trustees meeting, and this is the exhibit that did get the show trophy. Also in the same lobby. There's a U shape, and a number of things caught my eye. The saddle and the saddle blanket, among other things. The horseshoes, and when I'm talking about style differences, different regions have themes or peculiarities. And in the Houston AOS trustees meeting, I was also at one in San Antonio. The Western themes are very, very popular. I think it's very hard to make props like this work because I don't see a relationship between a saddle and a cattleya. I just don't. But it's a style thing. And you know, different regions have their own styles, and again, as an individual, you will find your own style of doing an exhibit, which will very likely be different than mine or somebody else's. So go with your strengths. I just say, good luck with the saddles. A couple of pictures of props. These are props that unfortunately the Cincinnati Society no longer has, but how we made them is still worth knowing. This is styrofoam here. This has been highly carved. We had a member who had his own tool and die company. He also had dental tools and liked carving. So he carved the jaguar head. And created 2 exhibits for the Cincinnati Flower Show back when that was a thing that had kind of a jungle theme, and they were very, very effective. But it's styrofoam that is painted with brown or gray paint, and while the paint is wet, you rub Pro Mix or potting soil into it so that it sticks and it starts to look rustic. And the advantage of that is you can carve the styrofoam to any shape you want, and when it gets banged up in exhibits, as it will, you just slap some more paint on it and some more dirt, and the more banged up it gets, the more rustic and authentic looking it is. But you can do lots of things with it because it kind of, I think, reinforces the naturalistic exhibits that we like in this region, and to me it reinforces the natural habitat of the orchids that we're growing. This is another exhibit. I want to draw your attention not to so much the plants, but to this. This is wallpaper. Beth and Doug Martin from Kansas City grow a lot of native cypripediums, and Beth found wallpaper in a very abstract design that when crinkled, wadded up, and then smoothed out again, looks like stone. And she used that a number of years in exhibits, and I'm not kidding, I've gotten within 2 to 3 feet of that, and it still looks like stone. So if you're trolling through wallpaper aisles, or if you have something in your closet that was an abstract pattern from the 70s that you don't know what to do with, crinkle it up. If it looks like stone, you've got yourself an orchid prop. I'm tossing out ideas here. Now we're into the Rogues Gallery. Please don't try this at home. And there's 2 points that I think these exhibits make. This is one, I think, in Wichita. This was at either Cincinnati or Indianapolis. These are on the floor. That's not a good vantage point for your plants to get their best shot at a ribbon to be seen. It just looks a little awkward. And in particular, when you add to it that this background cloth fights with the orchids, it's almost a feature in its own right. Leave the blue cloth home. Black or brown, neutral colors are your friend because your eye tends to tune them out, and you'll see orchids instead. So the motto, the takeaway from these 2 exhibits is an exhibit can be too low, and your background cloth shouldn't compete with your plants. Back in Houston again, the Lone Star was everywhere. And it was the same Lone Star. I don't know if you go to Lowe's or Home Depot to get them, but they were all the same size, the same star, all brown, and almost in every exhibit. We have the obligatory saddle, we have the hat, and we have something that looks like an object of torture there. I don't quite know what that is, and I'm not sure it's just because I have one contact lens in. There's some good things in terms of color flow for this exhibit, but doesn't it look a little stark to you? Because all the greenery is on the floor, and you can use greens to reinforce color flow, to soften the exhibit, and even though I want to emphasize that having some black space is important to rest your eyes, this is just way too much. This looks unfinished. It looks like they brought 6 ferns, decided that they should have brought 15, but couldn't fix it at that point. And unfortunately, that's what you notice. That's what you remember about that exhibit. We're in Texas, or we're in the South. I think we are in Wichita at a trustees meeting there. Here is a wagon. It had a matching wagon on the other side of this. And when you're choosing props, be aware that sometimes it can lock you into some things that you don't like, which is, how do you get your plants to be seen when they're all sitting on the same level? Because it's kind of hard to create elevation in a wagon. And the wagon became its own prop. Here's the other side of the wagon. And to make matters worse, they've got a maple tree in there, which is just clutter. I mean, you're not going to mount orchids on it. It doesn't seem to have a purpose. And all you see is this kind of hot mess of plants. Blue cloth, throw it away. And notice how much moss there is. I use Spanish moss a lot, but I use what I call a wisp of Spanish moss because I'm trying to use it to fool the eye. I'm trying to disguise a pot hanger or a basket or a leaf that maybe I should have trimmed and chose not to because the plant didn't have that many leaves left. But notice how dominant it becomes in the exhibit itself. So all the good things that this exhibit had, which it had some good plants, it's got some blue ribbons, they've got an attempt at ribbon here, but the moss just overwhelms everything. So with Spanish moss in particular, less is definitely more. And again, visually you want your heavier things at the bottom, lighter things at the top. This is the Indianapolis show. This is probably Mike Hinshaw's exhibit, but he chose like a baker's rack to mount the plants on. So there's a shelf here, a shelf here, a shelf here. And all of his heaviest plants visually are right here. And it's like the exhibit should have been flipped upside down. But because he's got fails, and he's chosen to put them on a baker's rack, they would have looked just weird down here. So he put them where they would be seen, which is fine for the plants individually, but the exhibit looks topsy-turvy to me. This one suffers from the same thing. The plants are all in the top half of the exhibit, and as much as I like driftwood, you can have absolutely too much of it. This is virtually all driftwood. And I mean, what is its job? You can't have too much driftwood. You can put it in the wrong place. I would have left virtually all of that at home. So that's the takeaway from these guys. You can also have too many plants. This is what you taught. This won the show trophy, I'm sad to say. And these are all certificates for the class winners in the plant categories. It had magnificent plants. This was done by Brian Rinke and Max Thompson, who grow superbly. They're one of the finest growers in the Plain States that I can think of. But they should have left a lot of this at home, or they should have done an island. Because not only is it just a hot mess of plants, but as my eye goes across, I see rows, and it's reinforced by whatever this is here. And the effect when I walked into the auditorium and saw it was like looking at a choir or school picture of plants. So, two takeaways. You can't have too many plants, and if they're all on a flat surface, I mean, where's the focal point? I mean, there is no focal point, there is no symmetry. It's just lines and lines of really good plants, and their quality just kind of gets lost. So, you don't want, in the smaller exhibits that we do, you don't want to look across your exhibit and see two plants at exactly the same height. You can elevate one and drop the height of another, even if it's only a couple of inches. That's much more interesting because you don't see that many straight lines in nature unless you've just mowed your yard. But in your garden, in your flower beds, you don't see a lot of straight lines, and that's what we want to replicate here. So an island would have been a much better choice, or be much more selective about the plants to bring in. And I think, it was simply the sheer quantity of good plants that got this exhibit the trophy, because the design itself, I would not have been very happy with it. I would not have done it. We're international now. This is the Orchid Society of Great Britain at the Chelsea Flower Show in 2014. And they are a society, and like us, they don't know, by and large, what plants are coming, and they have to build the whole exhibit. So they take 4 to 5 days to build the frame that this thing is on. And then on days like 3 and 4, that's when they get their plants in. But one of the advantages is, because they're drawing from a large group of people, is they can get masses of plants in the same color together. So that's how they've grouped them. And it actually was a lovely exhibit. At Chelsea, you don't get an AOS show trophy, you get certificates. There's a gold, a silver, and a bronze certificate for first, second, third places, and there's multiples given. And their exhibit got a gold certificate. It was quite well done. It was probably well over 100 square feet. This is the McBean's exhibit. It's a commercial outfit that unfortunately just closed, I think, this year. I wanted you to see the whole exhibit before I showed you this, because again, since it's a commercial exhibit, they can have multiples of similar or identical plants, and that's what they did. There's two things to notice here. Notice how they wrapped the pots in moss rather than cloth, which I thought was a nice touch. And they also did this. They had a piece of driftwood that if I could have stuffed in the backpack, I would have. In any exhibit, even if I'm not crazy about what was done overall, I look for little things I can steal, little ideas I can steal, not necessarily the driftwood. But notice how effective the cymbidiums look against this piece of driftwood right here. And how, and the paths are grouped here with a nice piece of driftwood reinforcing it here. And the colors, you've got tall vertical reds moving down to less vertical reds. It's got a lot of things done well, but I just thought this was magnificent because the driftwood is doing what you want the driftwood to do. I'll close with two shows. The Taiwan Orchid Show had a big pavilion in which there were mega exhibits done by commercial entities. This was an entire wall of this pavilion with orchids all over the world. This was, I decided not to show you all of it. This was actually a map of orchids of the world and orchids and ivy. And it's very heavy on Phalaenopsis. But notice they've got the white colors at the top, moving to darker colors still.
Where is this from?
That's Taiwan. It's in Tainan City. It was a commercial exhibit. Whoops, Daisy. I went ahead too far. This was next to it. These are actually balls of Phalaenopsis mounted. This was, I thought it was the Taiwan Sugar Company. I thought it was Taisuko. I'm still not sure because everything's in Mandarin and not in English. Nothing was in English. And it had a very oriental theme to it. The balls of flowers just knocked me out. The downside of it, and it was not limited to this exhibit, was they flashed weird lights on it so you didn't see the orchids in their true colors. And they did have some dyed Phalaenopsis in the exhibit. And this is the exhibit that won the show trophy. This required bobcats to assemble. It was approximately 40 feet high. And these are clouds of Phalaenopsis here. And there were some dyed ones too. And two birds on a track where this bird, or not a rooster, but definitely a male bird, came in and out of this tunnel to music to greet this bird, and they bobbed their heads at one another. And that's what won the show trophy. Now, I've shown you a Wardian case that won a show trophy, and I've showed you this guy that won a show trophy. That's the gamut we're dealing with. It was really awesome. But again, this was a commercial enterprise. If they need 50 Phalaenopsis that are identical so they can cluster together, they're going to have them. We in a society will not, so we make do. And the last exhibit I'll show you, this was at the World Orchid Conference in Guayaquil in 2017. This did not get the show trophy. This was the Allied Societies of Thailand. It was a huge island. I'm showing you one side of the island. But notice how the colors are grouped. And here, and paths are all on the jungle floor, moss all around. And from the other side, isn't that magnificent? There is a waterfall, which I think that's a stream of water right there. And the takeaways from that are, one, it's truly beautiful. But notice how effectively they've used the driftwood frame. And again, this is almost certainly made out of driftwood. They've got a lot of moss, but on an exhibit this scale, it looks kind of normal because you see moss in Florida dripping down and weeping from the trees. So that looks good. And they've got good color flow here. And this is all following one log. And notice they've got similar paths grouped together here, separated by ferns. So there's a lot of things that mean we can't begin to duplicate this scale, but we can miniaturize it. And, you know, an open driftwood frame would be kind of interesting if you've got plants that you can run along the top of it, or along the side of it, or suspend from it. You can cluster paths together and create a little valley of moss in between. There's lots of ideas we can borrow from exhibits, even giant ones that we can make work for us. And the last thing, this is where I get lots of my stuff, and you can get them anywhere. One of the things that I've started using for mounting purposes is black electrical tape. I used to use wire and or duct tape, and Gorilla Tape. Well, I could tie my Tahoe to a piece of driftwood with Gorilla Tape, and I think it would still be there. But electrical tape is narrower, it's stretchy, it's less obtrusive, and it sticks to itself. So I think electrical tape, if you've not got it in your show kit, is really wonderful to mount, to attach to plants to things.
You mean black electrical?
Black electrical tape. Just, you know, I don't know, what, $2, $3, you know, 1,000 feet, it's, you know, it goes a long way. And I get the soft annealed wire. It used to come in a roll, now it comes on a stick. But it's valuable because you can cut it real easily, you can bend it in any shape. And if I have to run wire through a pot to suspend it from something, that's what I use because it's cheap. You can cut any length and mold it to any shape that you want to. Other props that we've used, black stones, you can find those anywhere. We don't have a good supply of moss unless somebody goes to somebody else's woods, and moss makes me sneeze. So I personally hate using moss, but it's also a wonderful tool. If you're going to use ferns, the Boston ferns, to me, the leaves are a little too coarse to be really effective, so I always opt for ferns that have finer cut leaves. I think that's my personal preference. Scrounging, I keep my eyes open for anything I think might be handy. When I was married, my in-laws lived in Colorado Springs, and we'd go hiking in the mountains, and I have a selection of rocks that occasionally make their way into an exhibit. Because just gray rocks, brown rocks that have an interesting shape are as effective as a piece of driftwood for some plants. So just let your imagination run wild. And my closing point is, please get your hands dirty and do an exhibit. They're fun, they can be frustrating, they're time-consuming. You'll end up, you know, sneezing and washing your hands afterwards to get the moss spores out of your system. But and maybe it'll do well within a ribbon, maybe it won't. When I was new at this, the trophies meant a lot to me because it was kind of a measure that I learned something. I do it, and I've done it for a lot of years now just for personal satisfaction, you know, relief from job stress, and just because it's fun to walk away after 4 or 5 hours thinking I've created something pretty. So please get your hands dirty. Thank you.
Very nice.
Jan,
Yeah, questions?
we have discussed and ruminated and argued and don't know where the hell we're at anymore about this question of themes for our show.
Yeah.
Russ Vernon kind of tackled it with us and helped us a little bit. I can't remember his answer, whether it's allowed or not
Oh,
allowed.
it's absolutely allowed.
Well, our thought was a Kentucky theme, horses, what else?
Yeah,
Bourbon, what else? You know, fast women.
Depending on the time of year, Kansas City has hosted Mid-America's, I think, 3 times that I've been to now, and their show is always around Halloween. So they have a Halloween theme, and I almost threw in some slides because they, in the exhibits, there was a skeleton in one exhibit, there was a small coffin in one exhibit. You know, I don't know, I don't think it was a real coffin, and I think it was, you know, you go to a costume store and, you know, there's, or something like that. But what was cool about the coffin was it had a glass top in the front, and they had like masdevallias and small miniature plants inside. So it had a job, it had a purpose. It was wonderful. So I think themes are perfectly fine, and because it gives people something to hang their hat on in terms of doing something different.
Does the theme have to be the theme for the show? I think he was asking partially about, could we just have a
Yes,
theme
yeah,
for the
yeah.
exhibit?
Yes, yeah, I see nothing wrong with that, and there's absolutely no prohibition against it that I'm aware of. I would, and I think things are helpful. And to be honest, one of the best shows in terms of exhibit creativity I ever went to was many, many years ago when there were two Indiana Orchid Societies, and there was one at Minnetrista Civic Center in Muncie, Indiana. And there was no AOA show trophy. It was all ribbon judging. And the exhibits there were some that were in model cars. I wish I'd taken pictures. If I did, they're all on film anyway. It was truly, everyone's imagination ran wild because I think they felt all the rules, all the fetters were off. That's an extreme example, but I've been to a handful of shows where there was a theme for the show or others where there was a theme for the exhibit, and I think both are fine. Because if it gives you some specific concrete ideas that you've not tried before, I think that's terrific.
Good.
That's a yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just a question in terms of semantics for theme for the show. How, obviously, other exhibitors have to come within that theme. How much time, complete time, to give other societies that you say?
Where I've seen it done, the theme was optional. So I think it's kind to make it optional, because some, depending on who's doing the exhibit, they may not feel, if it's an individual doing a small exhibit, they may not buy into it as much. But I think the concept is great. Other questions?
Are there trophies for #1 winning theme within a?
Not within the MAOC's, not within the show schedules we've got, but you can create a category for that. Because every society, you can modify the show schedule as you see fit. So if you want to add a trophy for that, you've got every right to do that and set your criteria. Do I sense a theme coming up this fall? Yeah,
I heard you mention something about you hadn't cut off some leaves or whatever.
yeah.
What is what's okay when someone sends their plant in? You know, is it okay to?
I always check.
Permission?
Yeah, I will very rarely cut off a leaf if the owner's not there. Because most of the time, the people who send plants in have already groomed their plant. So I can do a couple things if I feel like I can't cut a leaf off and it's awful looking. One, if I can put another leaf over it, or if it's next to a fern, put some fern leaves over the objecting leaf. I've even taken a piece of tape and just, taped one good leaf over a bad leaf. Double-sided sticky tape is your friend. I've used a little tiny bit of Spanish moss to cover a leaf. Because again, you don't want to put so much moss on something that the moss itself becomes a distraction. But if it's like, trunk Lloyd, it's been a long time since I took French. School the eye, a little bit of Spanish moss can do a lot for you in that category. So if I know the plant's owner, like Steve Hellman, Steve hasn't done a lot of shows recently, but he's always given me an okay to trim a leaf or pull a leaf off. And if I have or know somebody's okay with that, I will trim as little as possible. Mostly I just try to hide it. Yeah, other questions?
Are you familiar with our jack-o'-lantern spectacular here?
No, I'm not.
It has a theme every year, and it's 5,000 pumpkins. And it's a
Oh, cool.
Every year, that's the theme.
Pumpkins can be hard to work with. One of
5,000?
Yeah.
They're all done by artists. They're all done by artists.
I can use some lead time on that.
Check it out.
Okay.
Look up Jack
Okay.
Punch Spectacular.
Well, once, and this was not an exhibit that had a theme, my neighbors had this rusted thing, which I thought looked like an old plow. It had, it was actually a grass seeder or something, but it had been outside for, I swear, 20 years, and was all weathered wood and rusted metal. I thought it looked awesome. So I put that in an exhibit at a show, I think it was might have been a Mid-America in Nashville, and I took another member with me who had not done a lot of exhibits, but had great artistic sense. And we had this big yellow and brown oncidium that we draped over the handle of the thing. And that became the focal point of the exhibit. And we walked away Friday night just thrilled. Came in Saturday morning, people came rushing up and saying, "We're so sorry, we didn't know what to do with it. It had fallen over." So, not by a lot. But enough that crawling into the exhibit at 7:30 on a Saturday morning, where you can't really take your exhibit apart at that point and trying to prop it up, that was a little awkward. So I didn't use that prop again, but I also learned that we now travel with a sandbag or two, so we can anchor something. Yeah, it's also a good lesson. We had some members who donated really old jeans, because jeans are indestructible, and another member's wife who sewed seams in it and stuffed it full of sand. It's a good thing to have. It's a real good thing to have. Yeah, other questions? And again, I'll be happy to make a copy of this for anyone who would like it. Just see me before I leave and I'll make sure you get it somehow. The web is wonderful. Thank you.
Great, thank you.